Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. We all know what happened on the 26th of September 2022. Mysterious blasts hit the Nordstream pipelines that connect Russia with Germany. And after this blast, there was a phase of blaming against Russia, and lots of mainstream media outlets and also European and Western officials blamed Russia for bombing its own infrastructure. And then there was a phase of silence, I would say, after this blaming game, until the piece of investigation that came by Seymour Hersh in February 2023, which pointed fingers to the Biden administration, saying that this operation has been carried out with direct supervision of the Biden administration, cooperation between the CIA, the Danish intelligence, and probably also the British intelligence. So after this piece, there was a cover-up attempt by several media outlets. It seems that there was an attempt to publish some fake news, I would say, or information about who committed this crime, and they blamed a pro-Ukrainian group, and we didn't know which pro-Ukrainian group committed this. After that, Seymour Hersh came with another article, another investigation. And now we are in May 2023. The 21st Century Wire published a damning investigation, and I read it and I went through it. It is very, very detailed, guys. The link is in the description below. And it is an attempt to fill the gaps in the investigation of Seymour Hersh. And that's why I'm hosting today my friend, Patrick Henningsen, who is the founder of the 21st Century Wire. I'm very happy to have you, Patrick, on Syriana Analysis.
Great to be with you, Kevork. Appreciate it.
And guys, before I start this conversation, link of Patrick Twitter is in the description, the 21st Wire investigation also. And excuse me that I have a flu. It seems that I have a summer flu now. I came from a sunny place and all of a sudden I have, unfortunately, a bad flu here. Patrick, before I go to the piece of investigation that published on the 21st Century Wire, I want to refresh the memory of the audience of Syriana Analysis. What was the initial revelation of Seymour Hersh before we jump into the investigation that published on your website, and how the US, Germany allegedly cover up this story by Hersh? What was the story of Hersh, and how the American and the German side tried to cover up this story?
Yeah, thanks, Kevork. Yeah, so on February 8th, Seymour Hersh self-published his report because no other mainstream media outlet wanted to publish it, presumably, even his former employers. So he published it on February 8th on his Substack. And basically what Hersh's source, and we have to, the credibility of this journalist's source ultimately rests on the reputation of the journalist. So as a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, Seymour Hersh has also done some very accurate work on Syria and also Afghanistan and Iraq. And so on so many different key issues, he's been very accurate. He's proven to be accurate. So that plus his career in the Vietnam War as well, it goes right back to, the 1970s. So there's no reason for us to doubt that his sources would be of the highest level and would be very reliable. That said, he probably may or may not have full technical knowledge of everything in the operation. That's what this report by the French journalist Freddie Ponton, which we've published at 21st Century Wire, tries to achieve, tries to fill in some of these gaps, as you said, Kevork, in your opening. Effectively, what Hersh said, this was a top-level meeting, National Security Council, the White House, CIA-led operation, covert operation, which used a specialist diving team, presumably underwater demolition experts, Navy SEALs most likely, from Panama City, Florida. And that's where the main Navy diving training station is. So according to our research, this is accurate. This lines up very nicely. It also lines up with Hersh's next point, which is key, that this operation to sabotage the Nordstream pipelines was carried out under the cover of a massive annual NATO drill called Baltops 22. That would have been in June of 2022, just off the coast of Germany there in the Baltic Sea, where you are, Kevork. And it seems like this would be accurate, according to the research of Freddie Ponton, in that there is plenty of opportunities. The equipment is there. The personnel are there on site. There is hundreds of ships, vehicles, aircraft, enough noise in order to carry out which would be a pretty difficult but straightforward operation to plant explosives 260 feet deep. This would be in one of the shallow parts of the Baltic Sea, just off Bornholm Island, which is a Danish part of the Danish archipelago. So that seems to be very credible, and it does line up with Panama City. They were also under the command of U.S. Special Operations and also NATO Strike as well. So these are the groups that would have been intimately involved in the planning of Baltops. So we have that, plus the certain specialized equipment is in the frame. So Hersh is more than plausible, actually very accurate, in fact. Third point that Hersh made is that once the explosives were planted, initially, the U.S. wanted to detonate them a couple of days after Baltops, but the White House wanted, or at least I believe the CIA wanted, a solution whereby they could detonate it on demand. So weeks or months after, so as not to arouse any suspicion that these were planted during the NATO drill. And so he says a sonar buoy was dropped from P-8 Poseidon over that location at the end of September, and that would have set off a signal, which would have put the timers in motion on the explosives. And so Nordstream's 1 and 2, so 3 out of 4 pipelines were damaged in this explosion. So there is speculation as to the fourth. Was that a malfunction? And if so, what do the Swedes and the Danish know about that, because they supposedly have conducted an investigation into this. So that's information we don't know, and it's not public. They're not releasing it because of, quote, national security reasons, which to me is baffling, since it is the most one of those high-profile events and consequential events really in modern European history, if you really want to look at it that way. Other point that, and so Hersh's reports of the sonar buoy being dropped, it seems to line up very well with the open source data on this. And so we can get into that later, perhaps. Norway being involved. Yes, Norway intimately involved on many different aspects of this sabotage operation. So that seems to line up very well in terms of the way the command structure is configured, but also the communications needed to be compartmentalized so as not to arouse suspicion. That seems to have been a joint NATO and Norwegian operation there. Norway having the most amount of modern, up-to-date equipment there on the Baltic Sea. They have a new command center they've just launched recently. So, they're in an excellent position to provide the operational support for this. And again, under Baltops, it is the perfect cover. But go ahead. So
basically, the cover-up that came after the Seymour Hersh investigation, that they blamed the non-state actors over pro-Ukrainian group, or whoever or whatever this group is definitely inaccurate. This type of operation needs a state actor that has the access to the Baltic Sea and the technology and the capacity and I would say also the motive to do such an operation, right? And if we put the motive aside, we know that there are different European countries, they have the motive, and the United States, but the technicalities of such an operation under the water, it's such a difficult situation where even the Russian side have satellite images, right? They're following this or monitoring this area. It doesn't make any sense from a logical perspective. Like if you use a simple logic, you cannot really believe that there is a non-state actor committing such a huge operation that is very, very complicated. And after that, you have to cover up this operation as well, because everyone will raise suspicions, and they will ask questions, and they will say who committed this and who has the motives, and etc., etc. So you need to have the technicalities, you need to have the technology, the motive, but also the media, I would say, cover up and the media has to be in your pocket so that you can cover up such an operation, right? And this all, if you connect the dots, it leads to one party, in my opinion, and that is the United States. And the United States has the biggest influence over the European countries, and it has the biggest influence over European media outlets. And nowadays, when you read European, German media, and etc., you really suffer, and you find a hard time to differentiate between the American media and the German or the European media, as if it is just one mouthpiece. And it's just a different language, similar terminologies. And this is one of the issues that President Assad said a few weeks ago when he was talking about Ukraine. And he said, when you watch the Western media, whether it's German, English, or American, etc., you find like similar terminologies as if somebody sent them a script and they have to follow this same script. And if you raise any questions about these cases, you're considered a danger to the national security of the country itself. So it becomes even very difficult for journalists to ask questions. And that is why when you suppress journalism and suppress asking questions, people will resort to alternative media. And this has become the job of the alternative media. Seymour Hersh is not an alternative journalist, right? He doesn't work for that. But his investigation was rejected to be published in his former employees, etc. And I think this is a very crucial times, and I'm very thankful also for people like yourself and having a brilliant website, 21st Century Wire, and especially after the Corona era, you did a great job on it. So now you summarize the investigation of Seymour Hersh on the Nordstream blast. What gaps the 21st Century has filled in this fascinating piece of investigation authored by Freddie Ponton?
Well, firstly, we've shown that the German conspiracy theory that they floated with the New York Times, which Hersh says was a CIA cover story, that there's a rogue Ukrainian cell. We don't know if they're Ukrainian or not, but we know they're rogue. They might be Ukrainian. They rented a yacht in Poland. Traces of TNT explosives on the yacht. I mean, this is like James Bond, Daniel Craig sort of stuff, take the wetsuit off with the tuxedo underneath, straight to the cocktail party. Oh my gosh, can't miss the party. It's just totally implausible. So, and the reason is the kit that's required, it's very likely you're going to require a specialized mini sub, not just any mini sub, but a specialized one, also hyperbaric chambers for decompression. You're talking about 300 feet of depth. So you can't just bring a diver up immediately. So this isn't something like it's wham, bam, thank you, ma'am operation, although the U.S. or the media might think so. So Freddie's research really shows that case. So he puts all of those things in the frame and also shows the means, the motive, the opportunity, but especially the motive, of course. And then that's what we'll show in part 2 of this investigation, is how the United States and Norway have cornered the market more or less for gas going into Northern Europe after the Nord Stream explosion, and 2, set the pace and set the scene for the new hydrogen market, which is due to come online in order to put Germany and Europe in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, net zero carbon projections. So there is a green WEF angle to this. So, and that's really important. But like what you said, Kevork, about the scripted media, there is a script. It's called the Rapid Response Mechanism. This is signed by all the G7 countries in June of 2018 when Theresa May was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And that stipulates that all G7 countries on any major foreign policy story of significance will all adopt the exact same talking points, and that's been agreed. They will streamline their messaging. So when you say script, you are talking about a literal script. And it's my opinion that the German mainstream media is completely populated and co-opted by Western intelligence agencies and really form an extension of the mouthpiece of whatever mainstream media messaging is coming out of Washington. You're going to get more or less the identical thing coming out of the mainstream German media. And I believe that's been the case since the end of the Second World War.
Actually, recently we even find out, thanks to the AfD party, Alternative for Germany, they asked a question to the German Federal Parliament, the Bundestag, about the funding of the German public televisions and journalists. And it seems that the funding of the government from the Foreign Office, the Foreign Ministry, and the Internal Ministry, it has increased over 40 to 50%. Those are journalists who work for public television and public outlets. And one of these public televisions, they waged a smear campaign against me. So I really wonder if this journalist who waged a brutal smear campaign against me is actually funded by the German government, because it seems that the Green Party and the Social Democrats, they increase the funding of the journalists, and even they are finding them alternative jobs, like side jobs beside the job of the journalism. They're finding them side jobs in order to enrich these journalists. So basically, I would say a few decades ago, we learned from history books that there were the poems of the Sultan, that he writes nice poetries about the Sultan and keeps promoting his image, and etc., etc. This has become the job of the journalists nowadays. They don't do the same. They are much more clever than previously. They don't directly support the government, but they actively they try to find excuses for the government actions, but also systematically attacking the opponents of the government. And this is the case. The people need to understand, when there is a systematic attack against any narrative that opposes the original narrative of the government, you understand why this journalist is doing this. But as I mentioned, it's very difficult in Germany to ask questions. And I am really asking myself if we still live in a free country here. And those who are asking questions, there are people being fined. There are people, their bank accounts are being closed because they have different opinion on this war in Ukraine. And remember, this war, it's in Ukraine. It's not in Germany. It's not like these people were sabotaging the national security of Germany. It's in Ukraine, and now their bank accounts are being closed. So, but these pipelines, it's an infrastructure that belongs to Russia and Germany, but the latter doesn't seem excited about knowing who blew up its infrastructure. Why do you think Germany is not interested?
Because this politically is an explosive, no pun intended, an explosive issue. Because if you have a situation where one NATO country is attacking the essential energy infrastructure of another NATO country, and to make it even worse, multiple NATO countries are attacking what is Germany. It's the German-Russian joint pipeline project is partly a German infrastructure. It's German property. And the results of this have been a skyrocket in energy prices for German consumers, and is driven businesses out of Germany. Whole industries are leaving Germany as a result. They've sustained material damage to society, to their economy, to the standard of living, because of a decision that was made by another NATO member state. If that becomes public, and that conversation has to happen in public rather than be hidden away in private, then the people of Germany then have to face the reality that their own government is working against the national interests of Germany. And that opens up Pandora's box to the bigger conversation. Why is Germany still occupied by the United States? Occupied militarily, occupied politically, on the intelligence services level, on the policy level, and now they don't even have decision-making powers over their own energy supplies. They can't enter agreements with foreign powers about where to get the most sustainable, cheap, affordable, and reliable energy to power their industrial base. They can no longer do that. Therefore, Germany is no longer sovereign. Period. And so a lot of Germans are understanding this. I see them online. I've seen the conversations, but the political elites in Germany are scared to have this conversation because they know they themselves are complicit in this. I really can't believe that Olaf Scholz, when he was standing next to Joe Biden on February 7th, 2022, and Biden said, if Russia invades Ukraine, we'll end the Nord Stream pipeline, with Scholz standing right next to him at a press conference. How on earth could
He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything.
He didn't say anything. And not only that, it's impossible to imagine he wouldn't have known or been briefed about that in Washington. They had to brief him. So why did he not relay that to the rest of the country? If they hadn't briefed him, that itself would be in a scandal, Kevork. That itself would be a scandal, because then Germany could no longer claim that the U.S. was its, quote, ally. So you see, this is just every way you look at this issue and how it's been covered up, blacklisted in the media, total blackout. The only reason they started talking about it is because Seymour Hersh published his report on February 8th. Otherwise, it would have been down the memory hole forever. I mean, how stupid do they think the public is, that they can't add one and one together to get two? But this is where we're at right now. So I really don't know. Well, we'll see what happens in the next few weeks, but the evidence is really damning. That this was a U.S. and other NATO countries involved, including Norway, likely the UK, and possibly even France. So we'll talk more about that in the future.
Patrick, you say the German journalists don't ask questions, don't criticize their government, but they do. You know when they do? They criticize Olaf Scholz when he hesitates of sending more weapons into Ukraine.
That's right.
That's the only time they criticize Olaf Scholz. They call him names. They publish cartoons, like even sexist cartoons, like portraying him as some sort of, we can't use the names now because YouTube will take down this video. But they portray him as he doesn't have balls, right, for sending more weapons and ammunition and tanks. This is the only time they criticize Olaf Scholz. The only criticism coming in Germany to Olaf Scholz and his coalition, I would say, partly comes from the Linke Party, which is the extreme left, and the extreme right. All the parties in the middle, they call themselves middle. I don't know if they're even middle nowadays. From the middle left to the middle right, they all agree on the same script. And if you watch the speeches in the Bundestag, they are all clapping to each other, like the coalition and the CDU, which is called now the opposition. But they're all cheering and clapping to each other as if they're one party. When it comes to Ukraine, they're all unified on this. But there is one big elephant in the room, in my opinion, here, which is the Green Party. And the Greens they campaigned during the elections for not sending weapons into war zones. And now they are the most radical party in the coalition, calling for more weapon deliveries to Ukraine. And now after the sabotage of the Nordstream pipelines, the foreign minister of Germany is Annalena Baerbock. She's from the Green Party, and she's active in covering up this, whether it's Seymour Hersh or anyone else who says that it was the United States. Do you think the indifference of Germany has anything to do with the Greens leading the foreign ministry, who are known for their radical position against the pipelines and promoting green energy instead? Is it like a dream that came true for them?
You really have to be suspect about who are the Greens in Germany, who is behind the Greens, who is funding the Greens in Germany. For instance, they're doing a victory lap last week after the last nuclear power facility was shut down in Germany, effectively taking away, again, more energy sovereignty, claiming that nuclear energy is somehow not green and not safe, when many would differ. And certainly the modern facilities and the technology now to think that a Fukushima could happen just like that, Germany not being on a major fault line as Japan is a ridiculous thing. But then you have to think, why did they start denuclearizing those years ago? They cut off the exit door where Germany could escape for a lifeline, even if the Nord Stream pipelines were shut down, that they would still have their nuclear fleet. They don't even have that. They're burning coal right now in Germany, and then that's good for the carbon markets because there's a lot of carbon credits being purchased there. So that sort of racket, that green racket, is doing very well. But Annalena Baerbock, every bad policy, it seems, that Germany is embroiled in, you could trace right back to her and her party. And also, I'm going to say that Germany cannot call itself sovereign if it allows the United States to create cabinet positions in their own government. An American, Jennifer Morgan, was appointed as the Secretary of State for Climate in Germany. They created a whole new position for an American who's the former head of Greenpeace, who is also the handler of Greta Thunberg, the personal handler of Greta Thunberg for the first 2 years of the Greta campaign. Jennifer Morgan was there at her side and really taking her as a chaperone. And so she's been installed into this position, which is intricately related to the Nordstream pipeline, German energy policy, and the whole energy market, retail market for Europe and where it's heading, which is down a rabbit hole right now, and it's costing Europeans huge amounts of money. Governments are having to pick up the difference in the fluctuations of cost in the market. That's putting the governments further into debt, into deficit spending. So every way you look at this, it's a total disaster. But yet they're saying we have to suck it up, tighten our belts for democracy in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really make much sense, Kevork.
Patrick, we always focus here in Germany about electoral interference from the Russian side. There is a lot of allegations that Russia is interfering in the elections here, just like in the United States, that has proven to be false at the end. But nobody is saying that Greta Thunberg, she came just 2 weeks or few days before the last 2021 elections in Berlin, and she campaigned for the Friday for Future. And we know the Friday for Future, they are like a smaller branch for the Green Party. And nobody says that what the Swedish girl is doing in Germany, campaigning just before, a few days before the elections, when the polls were saying that Greens numbers started to decrease, because a few months before the elections, they were the first in the polls. And then a few weeks before the elections, they become the second, and they were like decreasing the numbers. So Greta Thunberg came, and we know that all the youngsters here, 18, 19 years old, that graduate from the Fesch school, etc., they're all indoctrinated in the schools, and we all know who are the teachers in the schools who are teaching them, the blue hair feminists telling them all these things. Like, it's pretty obvious that there is an entire generation growing up with a similar ideology. It's the same, and these people vote for the Greens. And she came and she mobilized all these youngsters, and now they want to minimize the voting age into 16. And why 16 years old? Ask yourself this question, because these school girls and school boys all will vote for the Greens and for the radical left, right? So emotional, sort of emotive themes, emotive memes, emotional issues that can be riled up with celebrities behind them. This does appeal to younger people, and it will affect their decision making. They will vote whichever way Greta Thunberg or any Hollywood celebrity or other purchased personality will tell them to vote. So that's why they would want to lower the voting age, because there's less critical thinking going on at a younger age. Not to say adults, Kevork, these days don't have their problems and issues. We know they do. It can't be any worse than a 16-year-old who's just gone through puberty. Exactly. Patrick Henningsen, thank you very much first of all, for being my guest. It's a really pleasure to have you on my channel. I will have you definitely soon for a follow-up on this case. And guys, please go and read this article. It's damning. It's a little bit tall, like a long article, but there is so much details in it that we have to know when we discuss this case. This is the biggest industrial terrorist act that happened in the 21st century. We have to know, we have the right to know who did it, and we have to know all the details, because this could change the narrative. And if the narrative is changed, people will change their minds, and the public opinion will shift against the sending more weapons into Ukraine, because the only people suffering from this, remember, they are the Ukrainian people. And the people who send these weapons, they claim that they are helping the Ukrainian people. They are just doing the opposite. Just like when they dumped hundreds of tons of weapons in Syria, claiming that they're helping the Syrian people, 500,000 people died. And now in 1 year, over 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers died, and over 13,000 civilians died. These are civilians. These are souls that are dying. And please remember this. Please be active. Share this video also with your friends, and also share the investigation with your friends. Try to spread, I would say, enlighten your surrounding. That's the most important thing. But until then, Patrick, thank you very much again for being my guest.
My pleasure, Kevork.
And guys, if you want to support my independent work, please become a patron. Link in the description below. And see you next time.